Hello everyone, and welcome you all to another chapter of the basic JavaScript tutorial. So now we are on our chapter number 3, where I'll be showing you guys what is variables in JavaScript. Okay, so we are going to learn that what a variable is, why do we use a variable inside our JavaScript code, what are the different ways of using this, a few of the exceptions on how you are not allowed to define a variable. Okay, we are going to learn about all the limitations and all the features available with variables. So let's not waste much time and let's get started. So now over here on my screen, as you guys can see, now this is the same JavaScript file in which we have worked in our last class. So you guys can already see that I do have my first line of code, which is hello world. Okay, so now we are going to learn about variables in detail in this first class. Okay, so if I tell you guys in very simple word, is a variable is like a container in which you can store information. Like if you want to temporarily store information inside something, variable is the place that where you can store your information. Okay, so there are different data types that you store, but regarding data types we do have a different class. So we will be learning about data types later, but here now let's try to understand this class first. Okay, so let's try to understand over here. So the first thing, let's say if you do want to save up something, or let's say if you want to do addition, or you want to have something inside your JavaScript program, how you guys do that. So for printing out anything, let's say if I want to print a mathematical equation, so let's go with console.log. Okay, and now I will just open parenthesis, and inside parenthesis let me just go with 4 plus 5. Okay, so as you guys can see, now I do have this option 4 plus 5 right over here. And now if I just run this line of code, okay, over here, now let's run this console.log, which is 4 plus 5. Now here you guys can see still it is showing me hello world, because first we need to keep one thing in mind, that anytime you are changing your code, before running or before executing that set of code, you need to first click on Control S to save it. And now when I run this code, you guys can see I do have the answer as 9. So I've been doing this JavaScript coding for a long time, but still I do make this kind of mistake. In case like you do know a lot of other language, this is kind of confusing because you do tend to forget it sometimes. Okay, so Control S to save it, as you guys can see. But how you guys will understand that whether your JS file is saved or not? So now you guys can see, let's come here, and instead of 4 plus, if I just put a multiplication, you guys can see now on top over here your JS file actually have this white dot. So once you have this white dot, that basically means that now let's come here, then again I'll just put it plus, and you guys can see when it is showing you with a white dot, your file is not saved or it is not ready yet for execution. So I'll just click on Control S to save it, and now you guys can see that dot is basically gone. And now when I run my code using the code runner, it is showing me the answer as 9. Okay, so this is how you guys can actually get all your information. But now let's say if I just come down, and over here now I want to print another number, so let's go with console.log, and now I'll just open parenthesis, and what I want to do exactly over here is I want to add another number. Okay, like let's say I want to add, or I have 8 over here, and I want to add 8 with the sum of these numbers. So over here eventually, like if I don't have a container, in that case what I can do, okay, So in that case, now I have to come here, then I have to put on +4, then I have to put on +5. And now let's try to run this code. Control S to save it. Now let's run this code. And here you guys can see it is showing me two answers. One is 9 and the other one is actually 17. So 9 is for the first line of code and 9 is for the second line of code. Still, it is showing me some answers. But just think that the I want to add this one, I want to add 8 with the sum of 4 and 5. So over here now there should be a place in which I can save the sum of this particular number. So for that, and for that case only, over here we basically do have this variable. Okay, so now for that, what I can do is I will come here and in my first line of code, okay, so let's click on enter. Now I will just come here and I'll just go here on top, and now I will just create a variable. Okay, so how to create a variable over here? You can just type a name. Okay, let's say I will just type a name which is my num. Okay, or I will just type my num equal to the thing which is 4 plus 5. Okay, so I'll just put this equation which is 4 plus 5, and instead over here, now what I can do is, as you guys can see, console.log, and instead, as I already do have the equation over here, I want to print my num. Okay, or this variable. So you guys can see my num here, this is actually a variable. And now if you want to plus, let me just go with plus, and after that I will just go with my num right over here. So over here, my num is basically the variable which is the container for these elements, which is 4 plus and 5. Okay, so now over here, now let's try to run this line of code, and you guys can see it is showing me 9 and 17. So everything remains the same. So over here, what I did was I didn't write 4 or 5 over here, and I didn't repeat the same thing, making my code longer. But instead, what I did is, for a shortcut, I have mentioned the elements inside a variable, and I have mentioned the variable to print, and then I do have a random number, and I have just put the name of my num variable, like whatever content is inside that, it will just actually add up with the number which I have provided. So a variable works as a container right over here. Okay, so that's how it actually works. So now let's come here. But if I tell you that the way I do have mentioned the name of a variable, it is not the right way to write a variable. Okay, because if I just come here and let me just type let. Okay, so over here now I will just type let, and I'll just give it up a space, and over here now this is the way how you are supposed to define a variable. Because once you use let before a name, your computer will basically understand that I am actually trying to define a variable. Okay, so for temporarily saving your object or elements inside anything, a variable can be used in that instance. Okay, so over here I have mentioned let my num equals to 4 plus 5. But now instead of just having this equation, I can directly put on a number instead. Okay, so I'll just put on a number which says let my num equals to 9, and now I'll just come over here on top, and now I will just delete the second line of code over here as well. Okay, so as you guys have already seen how this actually works, and also let me tell you guys that over here you guys can also update it. Okay, like you guys can come here and you guys can just update this variable which you have already defined. Okay, so over here now if I just type my num variable, okay, So if I just come here, my num, and I'm just telling that now, from now, my num is equal to 12. Okay, so I do have uh, define that. And now let's come here and I'll just try to print it console dot log. I'll open parenthesis, and over here now I will just type my num. Okay, so I do have put my num, control S to save it. And now if I just run, here you guys can see first one shows 9 and the second one shows 12 over here, because I do have updated the content which was there. Okay, so in coding, a very important thing that we should always keep in our mind, that all the codes which we are executing, it executes your code in an ascending order. Let's say 1 2 3 4 5 and so on. Okay, it doesn't start coding from in a descending order. Okay, so in that case, now let's click on enter. Let's come here, and from here now what I can do is, if you do want to put on some arithmetic equations over here, you guys can also put on those arithmetic equations right over here as well. Okay, so now once you are done, now let's say till now we guys were working with numbers. You guys have seen that I have worked with numbers, and I have mentioned let for defining a variable. But here, if you guys just notice that over here I didn't mention let, but it still worked. But now let's say if I just come here and if I just put let, you guys will see that I will have an error in my code. Okay, so over here now you guys can see that I do have something wrong with my line of code, and it is not giving me any output at all. Okay, so if you just come here, let's go to the output option and control S to save it. And now let's try to run this code, and you guys can see here it is showing me an syntax error. Okay, so for that now what I'll do is I will again come here and I'll just delete it. But now you guys might be thinking, for the first variable it was working, but now when you're trying to mention it for the second variable, why it is not working? But it's not like that, that it is working for the first variable and it is not working for the second variable. It will also work for a second variable, but not for the same variable which you have defined once. So you need to keep this thing in mind, that you can define your variable at once, only once. But if you're updating your variable later, you can do it multiple times, but defining a variable is only allowed once. So we have actually got an idea about those numbers and stuff. But now let's say inside a variable, instead of a number, if I want to save a string, or if I want to save a line of sentence or any character, how I am going to do that? So now let's look into that over here. So now for that, the same way I will type let, because now my PC will basically understand that I am trying to define a variable. So I'll just type my name equal to Joseph. Okay, so I'll just go with Joseph, and now let's click on enter. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to type a console.log, then open parenthesis, and I will just type the name of my variable, which is my name. Okay, so if you just take a look now, what do you think? Is this code correct? Like, will it work when I execute? So control S to save it. And now when I just run this line of code, okay, you guys can see that it shows that Joseph is not defined. Okay, so it is actually showing me an error inside my code. So over here now, what we need to understand, that for numbers, as you guys can see, I do have these numbers. For numbers, I have defined it, so it have understood over here that it is coming here. But when I do have mentioned my name, and now I do have mentioned a character or a string, and you can actually have a name like a variable name with just only one character, but I prefer you guys not to use it, because more for small thing it will work. Okay, like if you do have a small code, but when you have a longer code or when you have to code a few pages, in that case make sure to use the full name of what you're working of, like what that particular thing is for. So if you use the whole thing, it will be easier for you to understand as well. Okay, so over here now I need to think that computer doesn't understand my language. What computer does, it changes whatever I'm writing in my language to binary code, because computer do understand binary code. Okay, and that binary code is again translated using the natural language processing model, and that it gives me the answer which I understand, because at the same time I don't understand binary from my side. Like I want to have my code in a simple way, like I want to view the outcome in a simpler way. Okay, so in that case now, to work with that, I need to make sure that I do define my variable. So I can just go with double quote on both the sides, or I can use single quote on both the sides. Okay, so either I use double quote or either I use the single quote over here. Okay, but keep one thing in mind. Let's say if I just used at starting I used double quote, then for closing it down I am not supposed to close it down with a single quote. Okay, because it will show me an error, and vice versa. Like if I just quoted first with a single quote, then I can close it down with a double quote over here. Okay, so these are the few simple thing that we should keep in our mind while we are working over here. So for me, for defining this variables, most of the time I do prefer the double quote. Okay, and now let's try to understand that how it will be executed. So now if I just come here and now when I just run my code, and as you guys can see it is not showing me anything because I didn't save my file. So control S to save it. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to run my line of code, and it says 9, 12 and Joseph. So now you guys can see here I am getting the output Joseph as well. Okay, so now this is done right over here, and now let's try to understand that what are the things we should avoid while writing the name of a variable. So the name of your variable can only be defined in one word, let's say with a character, only just A or only just B. Okay, so inside a variable, now let's try to understand how you can define a variable. So when we are defining a variable, so the first word, or I will just define it first, my name equals to Joseph. And here you guys can see my name is also mentioned over here. And as you guys can see that right over here, control S to save it. And the next thing is when I'm writing a variable, when I'm trying to write the name of a variable, I should not start with any number. Let's say I can have a variable name like num1, okay, or num2. This is how I can define a variable, but I can start defining a variable using one num. So at first I am not allowed to use a number, and I can use characters like all the alphabets and also all the numbers inside the name of my variable, but the number shouldn't be in front. It can be the second character, but it is not allowed to be the first character. Okay, and also you can use special character, and only two special characters are used in that case. Let's say you guys can see I do have the my name. Okay, and over here you guys can see that I'm now able to understand that what it is written, because using the capital letter over here I am able to read nicely. So once I'm able to read nicely, my visibility is better on what the code, what is going on inside my line of code. Okay, like I will be able to get a better understanding over here. So that is one way of typing the name of your variable, that you can understand that in a better way. Otherwise, the special character we can use is underscore name. Okay, so we can use underscore. Otherwise, we guys can use the dollar sign. Okay, so we guys can either use the dollar sign or the underscore for special characters while defining the name of a variable. So in this particular tutorial, we are not only going to learn how you can actually work using all of this, okay, but instead we are also going to learn how you can actually create a clean and more understandable line of code. What is the best way to code? Okay, how you can actually define a variable that it is easier for you to understand. So we are going to talk about all of this throughout our tutorial. And yeah, I hope this particular class was clear. And now before ending this particular class, let's rewind what we have learned. So first we have learned how you can define a variable for a number, how you can actually define a variable for a string. We have also learned that how you should not type a name of a variable, like you should not use any number at first. You can use both small caps and long caps and any numbers, but the number should be the second character inside the variable. You can't have spaces inside your variable. Like let's say if you do want to put a space inside this variable, you guys can see it is going to throw me an error right over here. Okay, so in that case, now that is one thing. And now I'm also going to tell you about another thing. Let's say you have defined a variable. Now you do have content inside my variable, and now let's say you have mentioned it with single quote. But now inside here I do have something. Let's say Joseph's dad is sick. Okay, so let's say I do have a sentence which I want to save inside my string variable. But now here, just by looking at this, try to understand in this case what should I use. Should I use a single quote or should I use a double quotation mark right over here? So obviously my answer should be that I should use a double quotation mark, because Python doesn't understand what you're trying to say without getting it in a binary code. So what happens over here is when you're trying to type Joseph, and again inside your sentence also you do have a single quotation mark, but your PC will understand that, well, it is ending right over here. Like the element is ending right over here and it won't run till here. Okay, so in that case, now what you guys can do is you can just type uh, this, and basically this works for in a different sense. But when you're writing this, okay, let's say Joseph's dad is sick. So if something is there inside your code where you have double quote, then use single quote, and if your code have a single quote, then tend to use the double quote right over here. So I will just come here and let me just go with double quote, and I'll just put on a double quote right over here. So now if I just run this line of code, now you guys can see that it is showing me Joseph's dad is sick. The whole thing, it is just showing me right over here. Okay, so yeah, I hope now you have a better understanding about all of this. And as I was telling that you can't have any spaces in between numbers. So let's say while defining a variable, if you face any issue, like if you have two name like username, or here you guys can see the name of my variable is my name, or here I do have my number. So these are two words. So to read it in a better way, you guys can see after one word, I do have put out a capital letter. And also, instead of writing this, you can just write my underscore name. So this is also easier to understand and easier to recognize. So I hope to see you all in the next chapter where we're gonna learn more about JavaScript. So see you all. Till then, take care and goodbye, everyone.